Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. So I've been a homeowner for 2 months now and it's already been quite a journey. Today I'm going to talk to you all about some of my highest and lowest moments so far of being a homeowner, and it's going to have tons of lessons learned along the way. This video is perfect for first-time home buyers out there. So let's get right to it. Because I have a finished basement, I requested that my inspector test for radon. He ended up testing for radon twice, which I was appreciative of because the first time the levels were normal, but then the second time they were elevated. So that being said, I went back to the seller, and the seller paid for a radon remediation, which is basically he paid for the underground ventilation system to like remove the radon in the basement. Definitely request that if you have a finished basement, because it's not something that's a standard part of the inspection. My inspection was in January and then I closed a few weeks later in February. And getting to Atlanta for my closing was such an adventure. I was flying from New York City and we had a snowstorm and I was just like, please God, please let me get out of here. Luckily, I was able to get out on the flight and then I was welcomed by a warm and sunny Atlanta. I was super excited about closing for obvious reasons, but mainly because this would be the first time that I would see my home completely renovated, or so I thought. So if you remember from the last video, which if you haven't watched, I highly suggest you do, I told you that the seller was moving kind of slow with the renovations. And so, but he said everything would be done by closing date, so I was excited for that. Prior to the actual closing, you always do a walkthrough of the home just to make sure that everything is looking okay, everything that was supposed to be addressed is addressed. So Chelsea and I did that, and when we walked in, I was just like, what is this? There were a lot of little cosmetic things that just weren't finished that should have been done. So there were a few bigger things. So the heat wasn't working properly at the time, and then also some of the toilets weren't flushing properly. My realtor did not want me to close, but I had like so many things being shipped from New York City, and I was just like, you know what, I'm still gonna close. The seller, he had the heating issue fixed the day that I closed, and then the plumber came the next day. So I had the operable toilet, at least one, the day I moved in. And then this going from his character, up until then he was very receptive to a lot of the things that I requested. He didn't give me any reason to believe that getting things done after closing an amendment would be an issue. So I decided to close. And so at first, when we closed, he was getting through the punch list quickly. But then things started happening very slow. If I could do it all over again, would I have closed? I still say yes, just because me moving into my home sooner rather than later, I was able to discover a lot of things that I was able to hold the seller accountable for. And I preface this with saying most sellers, once you close, like that's it, they're not trying to do anything else. But this seller in particular, he was like, you know, if you see anything, like just make a note of it, let me know, and then, you know, we'll work together. So and I think he said that because towards the end it was very clear that they were rushing to get things done, and I mean it still wasn't done. So for instance, when I was in the house like getting settled in, I noticed like the closets didn't have rods in it, and I'm like, do you have like a rod for the closet? He's like, oh yeah, actually it's in my truck, I'll bring it over. So this like little things like that. But a more serious reason where I was like happy that I moved in earlier, literally 5 days after into me being in the house, there was a torrential downpour, resulted in like a pool of water developing right outside my door in my master bedroom, which is in the basement. And it was slowly seeping in to my bedroom. And I'm like freaking out because I'm like, I thought the waterproof was done correctly. And I thought that, you know, apparently flooding was never an issue in the house, which clearly, if it wasn't an issue, why 5 days into me being in the house, this happened? My original plan was, after I get my inspection, if the inspector had any reason to believe that the waterproofing wasn't done adequately, I would go get a waterproof specialist to come in. So the inspector said that the waterproofing looked good to him, and the seller wrote a disclosure saying that there was no flooding to his knowledge. And then the appraisal, actually, during the appraisal, I learned that the house is no longer considered in a low risk flood zone. So all of that made me feel confident in not getting a specialist and just going off of the inspector's word. When the water started seeping in, I did call the seller and was like, hey, like, what's happening with this? This is what's happening. And he's like, okay, I'll handle it. So the next day he added an additional drain in that area outside my door. I had my friend come over and I was telling him about it, and he's like, honestly, I don't think that's adequate. So I got a waterproof specialist too, actually, to come in and like double check what they did. And they both were like, oh yeah, it's not really gonna serve you well during really heavy rain. Another thing that they brought up was that my gutters was just not proper. They weren't properly sealed, and I had no downspouts in the back of my house. So I go back to the seller and I explained like everything, and he was actually receptive to fixing the gutters correctly. He did add downspouts, but then the contractor, I mean, he just hasn't finished anything yet, and I've been trying to contact him for weeks, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna come, I'm having car issues, but he's still not here. Ideally, I would have went to the waterproof specialist, and during my due diligence, I would have said, hey, this needs to be done this way, and the gutters need to be properly sealed, and downspouts need to be in the back before I'm even in the house. So those are things that if I would have known, I wouldn't have closed. I hate micromanagers. It's not my thing. I don't like to micromanage people. I hate when I micromanage. But honestly, I feel like, especially as a single woman, it is important, it is essential. You're not being taken advantage of. Contractors started building my privacy fence. There was actually a big chunk of my land that wasn't covered. And I didn't even notice it until another contractor pointed out to me. So I went back to the contract and I learned that we agreed that the fence should cover the entirety of my backyard, not a proportion of it. So I went back to the seller, was like, hey, you know, according to the contract, this should be pushed further back. And he's like, oh yeah, for sure, let me tell them now. What happened was there was a tree stump there and it would cost more money for him to remove it. So I mean, flippers, they're always gonna wanna try to take the cheap way out. But I was so glad that I was able to just stop it before it was too late. A time where I wish I would have micromanaged a little more was when I hired a task rabbit to do my IKEA closet. Let me show you what he got done in 6 hours. Just have two drawers and this one here. I'm so livid. So Task Rabbit actually ended up refunding me 100% for the closet, and my brother was able to build it so beautifully. So the biggest moment, the biggest thing that happened that made me think like, wow, why did I become a homeowner again? Can I return this to seller? Was this. Yeah, so that was really hard. I'm so happy that I was home for that because I was able to really mitigate the damage. I turned off the water, called a friend who was really helpful. We moved my rug to the patio to air dry. I dried my sheets and my mattress protector in the dryer. I had a wet dry vac which sucks up water, which I highly recommend. So I was able to suck up water immediately. And I also had a dehumidifier because that's something I purchased immediately because I live in the basement. You know, I didn't want mold to form, so that's why I had the dehumidifier. So between the wet vac and the dehumidifier, I was able to really get things under control. I called my home warranty company, another thing I highly recommend you have, and they put in an emergency request for a plumber, but because it was the weekend, you know, service is not guaranteed. So I basically wasn't able to get a plumber in to see my home until Monday. So I thought that it was maybe a broken pipe. That was the only thing that made sense to me. There was also water in the kitchen, but it wasn't water coming from the sink and water wasn't coming from the dishwasher as well. It seemed like it was randomly like in the center of the floor. So the plumber found out that actually this is the cause of the damage. So this is a water hose for the refrigerator, and you can see, first of all, it's a very cheap plastic one. It has a lot of calcium sentiment on it. I don't know if you can see it, but also most importantly, this water hose, it says do not use for the ice maker. So what happened was this, and also it's bent. So it pressurized and water is gonna go towards the lowest point. The lowest point was the lights. So that's what happened there. So the fix was getting a stainless steel braided hose, and so he was able to install that. So I was just really happy that that was the cause and it wasn't something pricier like a busted pipe and all that damage that comes with that. Apparently that happens a lot. When I put a story on Instagram, a lot of people responded saying like that happens to either them or their parents. So definitely make sure you have adequate hose holding up your refrigerator, but also your washer. It can be like lead to similar issues. Now for the good stuff. So there have been quite a few great moments so far in my home. Some of my favorites are when I was driving from New York City to Atlanta with my brother. He was helping me well, I guess he drove, but he helped me drive my belongings back from home to Atlanta, and that was a super fun. We stopped in Durham to have breakfast with one of my best friends, hit the road, and my brother, he just helped me with so much around the house, like so many things. He's so handy. He taught me a lot. He beefed up my toolkit because he's like, what's this? It's a little bit basic right now. So he helped me get proper tools, taught me how to do things, and it was just really nice spending so much quality time with him as an adult, because we really haven't spent that much time together as adults. We haven't lived in the same home for a very long time, so that was a special moment. I really didn't want him to leave. He was there for 5 days and I'm like, no, please don't leave. Don't leave. No, come back. I'm still trying to get him to come back and do some things, but yeah, so that was great. Also, I've been having so much fun decorating my place. Most of the rooms are either travel themed or have travel infused in them, so it's been really nice to just bring it to life. I'll definitely do a full house tour a little bit later. I do want to furnish it a little bit more. Overall, despite the multiple unfortunate things that happened during the first 2 months of me being a homeowner, I still feel incredibly blessed. I feel so blessed to be in this position to build generational wealth. And this is my first time living alone, and it's been such a new level of responsibility. I'm learning so much about myself every day, so I'm just grateful for all parts of home ownership, the good and the bad. I hope this was super helpful for you. Please like, subscribe, share with any of your friends who are considering home ownership, and I'll see you next time.